Hey everybody, cool video up today. What I want to do is I want to take a look at this really cool guitar. This is a 64 Pre-CBS Fiesta Red Refin Strat. All original electronics. And I want to compare that to my 1970 Sunburst Strat, post-CBS era, right? I want to take a look at these two, and I want to see if there isn't something we can do with some pedals or similar to get these sounds really close. Can I get my 70s Strat to sound as good as that 64 Pre-CBS? Hang around, grab a coffee, and let's see how close we can get these two. Okay, so what makes the most sense is to go through some of the specs first. Let's take a look at this 1970. This is an all-original 1970 Fender Stratocaster. The exception to it being original is the 5-way switch that I put in, because instead of jamming it in the middle positions, this is my gigging guitar, so this was a whole lot easier to just throw the 5-way switch in. Some people will cringe because I soldered something into an otherwise all-original Strat, but I need this thing to work for me, so 5-way switch it is. Other than that, electronics, pots, capacitors, pickups are all original. Finish is untouched. It's a poly finish. It's a 7 1/4 radius, as the fretboard should be. It is a 4-bolt variety, so it's got a 4-bolt neck. It is a rosewood laminate fretboard. Other than that, pretty straightforward. Let's check out the 64. 64 is a refin. It's an old refin. Some of the finish has actually been worn away even on the refinish. Very cool guitar. Electronically, it is all original from 64. 3-way switch. This also has a rosewood laminate fretboard. It also has, of course, a 4-bolt neck. 7 1/4 radius. The 70 has been refretted with some bigger frets, some modern frets. This guy has the original frets, so they're a little bit more shallow, a little bit more narrow. It's not as big of a difference as you'd think, but it is a subtle difference. So let's get a bass line. Let's get some sounds and hear what we're dealing with on the 64. We'll start with the neck pickup, and we'll compare the two guitars. I want to compare the other two pickups. The first thing that comes to mind is that there's some more low end in the 64. This is, so compare and contrast, I think the 64 has more low end, or there's some missing low end from the 70, which I think doing some research you'd expect a little bit. They're pretty ballsy, the Pre-CBS Strats. Okay, the other thing on the neck pickup that I noticed at first was there's a little bit more organic compressed top end. I don't know if I would say the top end is extended as much as there's some upper harmonics there. Something you might equate with like the lightest of overdrive pedals. It's just there's something in the top end that's a little bit different. So let's take a look at the next two pickups. We're going to go the middle and the bridge and compare the two guitars. All right, so coming back from our baseline sounds, there's a couple things that I would say are very different. I mean, obviously we're in the same world of sound, right? It's still a Strat. It's still a single coil, great Strat neck pickup, middle position, and then, you know, a chimey, a very bright, quite percussive bridge pickup in both guitars. However, I am hearing two things. I'm hearing a bit of an EQ difference. Just generally speaking, there's more low end in that 64 than there is in the Strat, in the 70 Strat. Or said differently, there's a lot less low end coming from the 70 Strat. The other part is that I'm hearing, on the EQ side, the other part is there's a little bit more thump, a little bit more feeling on the pick hitting the string. So we're going to try to address those two things with some EQ. Or at least we're going to try it first to see if we can put an EQ in there and see if that makes any bit of difference. The second thing is this organic top end. Is this somewhat slightly compressed and very present upper harmonics that the 64 has that the 70 doesn't seem to have. And so when I think about those two things, I'm wondering if we can put together, you know, almost like a little box or a little system that you press a button and you can bring the 70 Strat into the 64 world. You know, can we do something with the EQ and can we do something with the upper harmonics that will get us closer to the world of that 64? And so what can we do? I think the easiest thing right off the bat is an EQ pedal. Okay, to address the upper harmonics, that sounds an awful lot like a bit of what an overdrive pedal does. Right? So if we find the right overdrive voicing, or if we find the right boost pedal or something that has an upper end that's a little bit compressed, maybe we could try a compressor, that might get us in the realm of this 64. So I think what makes the most sense is I'll show you guys a little experimental board that I put together. It's just an inline couple pedals, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we can grab the right overdrive sound or the right upper harmonic feel and sound to add texture to this 70 guitar. And then we're going to look at the EQ and see if there's something we can do to get us pretty close to a pre-CBS Strat. All right, so we are officially on pedal cam. So I have on the board an EP booster, which has got its own character, but it's an interesting idea because it's a boost pedal that has a little bit of that compression at the top end. An exotic compressor, SP compressor, that's going to be just to see if a compressor by itself, a clean boost compressor, will get us something that we want. And then the other one is a very straightforward overdrive pedal. Is there something we could do to get us, you know, in the range of adding some drive just in the right area that'll get us feeling like we want? So let's try them out. This is the 1970 by itself. So let's start with the drive on 0, and let's see if we can get a unity gain on the nobles. Now it's starting to mess around with the upper top end. But unfortunately, it just sounds like there's an actual overdrive pedal on it already. So although this is doing some top end shaping, this is giving us a little bit of compression on the top end, and it's giving us a little bit more bite. It imparts enough character, and it imparts the overdrive on more than just the top end, to the point where by the time we can feel it in the top end of the frequency spectrum, it sounds and feels like we have an overdrive pedal on. Not that that isn't a great sound, it's just, it's not getting us to the natural feel of that 64 Strat. So I think I would bail on the overdrive pedal at the moment. But let's try the other two. So interestingly, the SP compressor seems to be grabbing the spikes as you'd imagine it would, and it flattens out the sound a little bit, but the other thing that it seems to be doing more than anything is bringing the low end up. Which is good, because we're part of the way there. We do want the low end to come up to get back to that 64 that seems to have some grunt. But it's not doing anything to help us on the side of the top end. So let's see what we can get out of this EP booster, and maybe in conjunction with something like an EQ, we can get pretty close. Because I think moving the frequencies around with an EQ pedal is going to get us in the right vicinity, but the problem is going to be that we're not going to have any of that top end or any of that compression that we're looking for. So let's see what we can get out of the EP booster, and then see where we land with some combination of these pedals. Interestingly, we are getting a little bit of that character that we do want to hear. All right, so let's simplify this down to the real board we're looking at. Let's get that 64 again and see what our bass line is. Let's remind ourselves of what that 64 sounds like. 'Let's use this EQ pedal to see what's really in the 64. So I'm going to play the 64, and as I play some chords on it, I'm going to move around the faders, the sliders, if you will, to see what's really in this guitar. So 100 makes a pretty big difference in what we have going on. 200 makes a really big difference. To my ears, 400, you start to tail off. I don't think this is having as much of an effect. I'm looking for the biggest difference that I'm going to hear inside of this EQ curve. The sliders that make the biggest pronounced difference to the tone. So there is something at 1.6K that's having a real impact in how you hear the pick hitting the strings. Interesting. So interestingly, on the 3.2 and the 6.4, by the way, this is just a standard non-modded bone stock off the shelf Boss GE7 equalizer. I picked this because this is a real popular, real easy to get your hands on pedal to try to do something like this with. The 3.2 and the 6.4, actually, when you slide these up, they almost bring in some of that spiky characteristic that the 70 has that we don't want, which leads me to believe it's something we might want to take out of the 70. So this little experiment basically showed us the 100 and 200 might give us some of that low end that this has, the 1.6K, some of that pick attack that this guitar has, and the 3.2 and the 6.4, we might want to duck a little bit to get rid of some of that glassy, spiky sound that 1970 has. So let's flip guitars and see where we can get with this EQ pedal. Here's the 1964 bassline neck pickup. No pedals on. A couple very quick EQ moves. Let's see what happens if we take out a little bit of that top end, a little bit of that glass sound, a little bit of that spikiness. Now that might be a little bit extreme at the moment because these are pretty powerful sliders and they are having a pretty massive impact even by just sliding them around a little bit. All right, so let's grab a quick bass line with this 64 on the neck pickup, and then we're gonna bring the 70 back and we're gonna see what the difference is just with the EQ pedal, modified a little bit to where we've been investigating so far. '70 with no EQ. And now with the EQ pedal. All right, we've got a little bit more pick attack and we've got a little bit more low end now. So it's starting to, the pick actually feels quite like the 64. And the low end is feeling quite nice. But is there anything we can do to get us more of that rich top end? Enter that EP booster. Let's see if we can bring that back in. So that's really interesting because that is starting to work in what we want to feel and what we want to hear. That's a lot more round, and it's got a lot more of that compressed top end than original when you take the pedals off. All right, so one variable we have left now, we got these two pedals, and we've simplified this problem. We've simplified the difference in woods and pickups and electronics into maybe there's an EQ shift we can do, and maybe there's some compression, harmonic content, distortion in the top end that we can try to get out of pedals in this case. And we've put two of them together to make one tonal shift in this 1970 guitar to try to get closer to that pre-CBS glory, right? But we haven't looked at what happens if we flip the order of these two pedals. Here's the 70 with nothing. With just the EQ. With the EP booster. With the order flipped. That's interesting because that actually feels a little bit more natural. I don't know what it's going to sound like in the recordings, and I'm going to do my best to make the recordings sound like the room sounds. But as of right now, the EP booster into the EQ feels a little bit more natural. I think it makes sense to check a bass line again. So here's the 64, immediately followed by what we have now with the 70. That's real close, at least in the room and in my hands. Let's take everything off and see where we started again. I'm really happy with where that ended up, and I think we took something that seems really complicated. How do we get this whole system, a 64 Strat, and get a sound from a 1970 that is comparable, right? And what we did was we simplified that by intentionally picking some tools that would do what we needed to do. And we knew we were going to tone shape, and we knew we were going to find something that could give us a little compression in the right spot, maybe give us the right sound. I'd be curious how close you guys thought we were able to get here. I'd also be curious if you had some other suggestions for maybe better tools that are out there to accomplish this kind of thing. Maybe you've had experience trying to make other guitars sound like something else. Be really interested in your feedback. This was a ton of fun, and I really hope that you guys had a good time watching this. Like and subscribe to the channel because I have a bunch more ideas that I'm going through, a bunch more things coming out on the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.